in the morning papers, I think for the last time before Christmas. Rochelle De Kock from the Herald newspaper joining us, the editor of the Herald newspaper. Morning to you, Rochelle. As I was saying to Toombs, half expecting you to be wearing a reindeer hat, but we'll make up for it.
You always do this to Rochelle.
Poor Rochelle, she's like...
no such luck.
We're going to talk about the Herald in just a moment.
Happy holiday season.
And you. The Star newspaper, I'm afraid, attempts to block the SIU recovery of 172 million rand thwarted is their top story. The SIU receiving a major boost yesterday by the special tribunal. What was that story about in the Star?
Look, basically, we all know this businessman, Hamilton Ndlovu. Well, he was trying to get the special tribunal to stop further legal action against him while he's basically fighting SARS in a separate legal matter. And that ultimately failed because, what did emerge and what came out strongly is the fact that there's still about 50 million rand of his that he has not accounted for, and that ultimately is comes down to why he wasn't granted his legal bid. So it's quite an interesting story. I mean, like, we all know this man. I mean, he was flashing all these fancy sports cars worth 11 million rand, and that really caught the eye of SARS, and so this whole thing sort of spiraled from there. And it comes ultimately down from, the awarding of PPE tenders, which the SIU believes that he received irregularly. So it's quite an interesting case, quite a complicated one to an extent, but definitely a juicy one.
Yeah, it is. I mean, we listened to what Judge Modiba is saying here as well before we move on to the next one, saying the judge saying approximately 50 million rand remains unaccounted for. Listen to this, though. I think you may have seen the same part, Toombs, is that 15 million rand was withdrawn in cash through tellers and ATMs. That's a lot of money. Like, what is your daily limit on your card that you are drawing this amount of money?
Sure, that's a lot of money.
I was actually thinking, do you go around, or did you have like a whole lot of people taking turns? Because I mean, like, how much?
You just spend your day standing at the ATM.
15 million rand in cash.
And what happens to the rest of us as we're trying to get our money?
That's why there's no money in the ATMs at the moment. It's all been drawn.
Listen, let's let the SIU investigate this particular case. But I want to also highlight this one story here in the Star newspaper as well. A man's bid to evict customary wife fails. And it seems the court hearing there, Rochelle, that she was not just an ex-girlfriend, but his wife. This after Lobola was almost fully paid.
Yes. He basically, I mean, he was saying she became an unlawful occupier. I found that word quite interesting. Of his house when their relationship, soured. And she said, no, there's actually a Lobola negotiation agreement that's been concluded between the two families, and he'd paid 40,000 of the 50,000 he was meant to pay in Lobola negotiations. But then he, argues that there's some customs that hadn't been concluded yet, and in his view, therefore, they weren't customary. The customary marriage was not concluded. Yeah. So I think it's a very interesting case, and I think it's a good one. It's going to set quite I think it'll be one of those benchmark cases going forward, because I mean, this is always like, this argument between customary law and the rest of the law, and like, where does the how do I put it? It's a blurring of lines, and basically it'll be quite interesting to see what the court decides on that matter.
I think it's also a lesson for anyone, because I mean, I heard that there's a new feature on Instagram. Every time you refresh, people are getting married, someone else is getting married. There's a picture about a traditional wedding of some sort. So I suppose for all the newlyweds right now, I know the event and ceremony is so exciting, but I think it's so important to understand all these nitty-gritties that go into customary marriage, as well as civil marriage. Know your contracts, know exactly what you sign up for.
I think it's so important. I'll tell you why before we move on, because I think it ruins the romance. Because now you've got to go through the legal. It makes it sound like it's some kind of business deal.
Got you.
But let me warn you, is that when you don't do that, then it can really, really cause a problem. Rochelle, I'm going to ask you to be very brief with your top story, because we do have Fikile. In fact, Rochelle, I'm going to ask you to hold on for a moment. We have Fikile Mbalula, the Transport Minister. He's about to give the road stats, the interim road stats. Maybe don't go anywhere, Rochelle.